Testament. And so if you'll open your Bibles to the book of Ruth, we're going to find a lot of what we call typologies in the book of Ruth regarding Jesus. And if you'll open up to Ruth, the very first chapter, in the very first verse, we find some very interesting things that kind of give us the kind of little background into who she is and the story behind. So let's go into Ruth chapter 1. Verse 1, it says, "In the days when the judges ruled Israel, a severe famine came upon the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah left his home and went to live in the country of Moab, taking his wife and his 2 sons with him. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife was Naomi. Their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, and they were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in the land of Judah. And when they reached the land of Moab, they settled there." Let's kind of grab a little information here. Let's grab a little background on what's going on. First of all, there's a famine in the land during the time of Judges. And if you remember the time of Judges, it is a time after Joshua has died and is before King Saul is put into place. And this is recorded through the book of Judges. But there's a famine in the land. And so some of these folks from Bethlehem went into the land of Moab to get some relief from the famine. And the father's name was Elimelech. Now when you see El, anytime in someone's name or in someone in the scripture, the El refers to God. El. Jesus on the cross said, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani." Eloi means my God, my God. So anytime you see El, it means God. So Elimelech has something to do with God. Well, it simply means, Melech means king. God is my king. That's what Elimelech means. And so he took his wife named Naomi, and her name means pleasant. So we have this pleasant woman, and with a husband named God is my king, headed off to a land named Moab. Moab. What a story going on with Moab. I'm going to try and keep this as G-rated as I possibly can, but there's quite a story with Moab. Lot. Lot was in the land of Sodom and Gomorrah. And God was going to kill it, destroy the place, because it was so wicked. And Lot was told, "You better get out." So Lot and his family finally did get out, and just barely, as God began to destroy the place because of its wickedness. And they were told, "Do not look back," as God begins to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And if you remember the story in the book of Genesis, 15th chapter, Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. So now Lot was without a wife, and he has 2 daughters. Now these 2 daughters were going to be offered up by Lot to the men who came out of the city to greet these strangers who come into the city, if you remember that story. So Lot was without a wife, but he had 2 daughters. So Lot was pretty much unaccepted anywhere he went, and so his daughters conspired and said, "Here's what we're going to do. Since no one is going to take us in as husbands, let's get Dad drunk. And then when Dad's drunk, we'll take advantage of it." And that's what they did. And the oldest son born out of that situation name was Moab. Now Moab is an interesting name because Ab means father and Mo means chaos. The word M is chaos. If you look in your little sheet that I gave you, it's a sign of water. It's a symbol of water, and it means chaos. I think that would be a pretty fitting name for this family, Moab. Look at the chaos in which this family is now coming from. And the second son's name was Ben-Ami, and then from which we get the Ammonites. So we have the Moabites and the Ammonites coming from this wicked situation where these 2 daughters got their own father drunk. And 2 children were born. So Elimelech takes his wife Naomi, and his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion, and they journey on over to Moab. Now let's continue on with the story. And they settled there. Before we go on, I just want to make note of something. In this wickedness that we just talked about, God did not intervene. But He did provide for redemption. And that's the story of Ruth. Let's go on. Verse 14. Let's back up. Before we get all the way down, let's just kind of fill in some blanks here before we get into verse 14. Elimelech dies. The father dies. So now Naomi is without a husband. They have two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Mahlon and Chilion also marry some women from Moab, and one of them is named Orpah, the other one's name is Ruth. Elimelech dies, and so does Mahlon, and so does Chilion. So only ones left now are Ruth, Orpah, and the wife or the mother-in-law of these two, which is Naomi. So she's left now in a very desperate situation, and so she decides to go back to Bethlehem where she is from. And so her daughter-in-law say to her, well, we're going to come with you. And she says, no, you need to stay here. And she says something interesting. She says, you return to your people and to your gods, letting us know that they were indeed Moabites. They weren't Jewish people who happened to settle in Moab. They were Moabites. And so in verse 14 we pick it up there, and again they wept together, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. But Ruth clung tightly to Naomi, and she said this to her, look, Naomi said to her, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. You should do the same. But what is Ruth's response? Don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And whenever you die, or wherever you die, I will die, and I will be buried there. And may the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything to separate us. And when Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. So they decide to go on back to Bethlehem. And Ruth and Naomi are going back together. And when they arrive to Bethlehem, people said, hey, Naomi, it's good to see you. Oh, there's a big celebration going on. And Naomi says, please, don't call me Naomi, she responded. Instead, call me Mara, which means bitter. For the Lord Almighty has made my life very bitter for me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me home empty. Why call me Naomi? Listen to this. When the Lord has caused me to suffer, and the Almighty has sent such tragedy upon me. She's really upset. And can you see why? She has lost her husband and her two sons before they're even allowed to bear children through these young women. They die. And so she's very bitter. So she has no one not only to take care of her, but her family name cannot continue on. And so she thinks in her own mind that God has brought great calamity against her. And that God has raised his fist against her. And so she refers now to herself as Mara, which means bitter. Her name was pleasant, but now it means Mara because she's bitter about what has happened to her in life. So let's kind of unravel a couple of things here. We all have kind of had some things going on, maybe in our past or maybe in our family history, that are a little seedy to say the least. Maybe we have some things going on in our lives that we're not very proud of. But I don't think anybody in this room has had a situation that has brought to us Moab and Ben-Ami. Now maybe if you have, God still has a blessing for you, but I kind of doubt it. This is a sordid tale to begin with, for sure. And secondly, now this poor woman's children and husband have passed away. Tough time. Tough time to be sure. But God is going to redeem this whole situation. So let's continue on in the story. Chapter 2. Now there was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's husband, Elimelech. Isn't it interesting that this man Boaz was from Bethlehem? And he's also wealthy and influential. Now, as the story begins to unfold, you're going to see a great similarity to someone in the New Testament that we find in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And it's written exclusively about him. I'm not going to tell you who it is. You're going to have to figure it out on your own. But there is a great similarity between Boaz and this person found in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They were both from Bethlehem, if that kind of gives you a little bit of a hint. But the man in the New Testament was not wealthy, even though he had everything. But Boaz was an influential man, but he was a relative of Elimelech. And so one day, Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go out to the harvest fields and pick up stalks of grain left behind by anyone who was kind enough to let me do it." And Naomi replied, "You know what, that's a great idea. All right, my daughter, go ahead." So Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters, and as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belongs to Boaz. As it happened, you think this was just luck? You think it was just circumstance that led Ruth to Boaz's field? Do you think it's just luck or circumstance that anything really significant happens in your life if you are a believer? I don't think so. The Lord begins to work things where He wants you to go. And when He says to you, all things work together for good, this is what He's talking about. Now remember, she's from the tribe of Moab, and you know where Moab came from. And she's lost her husband, and she's lost her father-in-law, and she's lost her brother-in-law. But the Lord, in spite of all of those things, begins to pour blessing into her life. And the first part of this blessing was bringing her to the fields of Boaz. Boaz was a wealthy man, as we just found out. So let's continue on in the story. Verse 4. While she was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters, and he says to them, "The Lord be with you." And they replied, "And the Lord bless you." I've never worked any place where I walk through the door, someone says to me, "The Lord be with you," and I respond, "And the Lord bless you." I don't even get that here. Karen, when you come in tomorrow, I'm going to say, "The Lord be with you," and then you say, "The Lord bless me." Okay. All right, so we got that worked out. But that's a pretty cool situation, right?
Since Josh likes Star Wars, and I know there's some other Star Wars fans in here, they say the Force be with you. So.
Well, kind of similar, yeah, but not quite. We're going to be more specific, the Lord being Yahweh. So here we go. So now you're getting a little picture of this Boaz character. He's awfully generous, and he's awfully good to the people who work for him. Kind of a cool guy. Verse 5. Then Boaz asked the foreman, "Who is that young woman over there? Who does she belong to?" Now, ladies, don't get defensive here. By saying, when he says, "Who does she belong to?" don't say to yourself, "Well, I don't belong to anybody." That's a little different culture here that's going on, okay? So Boaz sees this young babe over in the field, and he says, Who's that woman over there? "Oh, well, that's Ruth. She came back with Naomi. She's a Moabitess, and she's with Naomi." "Oh," Boaz says, "really?" And so then he goes on and says, kind of the story begins to transpose where he says, "You know what? Don't give her a hard time. In fact, when pull out some of the stalks in your grain that you've been picking up and leave them for Ruth," because there was a custom back in this time. The custom back in this time was that you don't glean the corners of the field. So if you've got a nice square field, you don't glean the corners. The corners are left for people like Ruth. The people who are down their luck, the foreigners, the people who need a helping hand. Now you're not going to go out and pluck it for them. They still have to do the work. But you're going to leave the corners for them so that they can, by their own hands, go out and provide for themselves. So they were able to go out, and Ruth was going to go out on these corners and retrieve this grain. But Boaz intervenes a little bit. He says, "Pull out some of your stalks and kind of leave them behind for her. Would you do that for me?" "Okay, man, whatever you want, we'll do it." So so Ruth comes home, and she has got this huge amount of stuff. And she's really psyched up. So we pick up in verse 14. He says in verse 14, at mealtime, Boaz called to her, "Come on over here and help yourself to some food. You can dip your bread in the sour wine." So she sat with the harvesters, and Boaz gave her some roasted grain to eat. She ate all she wanted and still had left over. Who does this sound like? It seems like there was 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And people ate everything they had, and there was still some left over. Malachi 3:10 tells us that God is going to pour out the blessings of heaven. If we give to Him, bring our tithe, He's going to pour out the blessings of heaven so much we won't be able to take it all in. Ruth is beginning to get an idea of what this is like, because she had all she wanted, and yet there was still some left over. Notice the tenderness in which that Boaz interacts with Ruth. Notice the kindness that he is extending out to her. You notice that she is a foreigner. You notice that she is a Gentile. She is not a Jewess. She is a Gentile, but Boaz has begun to take her in and watch out for her. Verse 15, when Ruth went back to work again, Boaz ordered the young man let the grain gather right among the sheaves without stopping her. So before it was, hey, leave some behind, but now he says to her, no, let her come in and harvest with you. That's different. And besides pulling out all of the barley for her, so she's by the end of the day, she has got a whole bunch of barley to take back to her mother-in-law. Chapter 3. Let's keep the story moving. One day Naomi said to Ruth, "My daughter, it's time that I found a permanent home for you so that you will be provided for. Boaz is a close relative of ours. He's very kind by letting you gather grain with this young woman. Tonight he will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor." Now notice what the mother-in-law says for her to do. "Now do as I tell you. Take a bath and put on perfume and dress in your nicest clothes." Fellas, it still works, doesn't it? So Naomi's beginning to set all of this up. Ruth, I'll tell you what you're going to do. He's a close relative of ours. Clean yourself up really great. Put on your really best clothes. Put some perfume, and I want you to do something. I want you to go, and when he's sleeping and when he lies down, I want you to uncover his feet, and I want you to lie down there, and he will tell you what to do. Ooh, I don't know. I've been trying for 11 years to get my wife to sleep at my feet, but she's not minding. I'm teasing, sweetie. I'm not really. I'm not really. But there is something significant going on here that by her removing the cover and going by his feet, there's a lot of symbolism going on there. So let's continue on with the story. After Boaz had finished eating and drinking as one good spirits, he lay down at the far end of the pile of the grain and went to sleep. Then Ruth came quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Around midnight, Boaz suddenly woke up or turned over, and he was surprised to find a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. And she said, "I am your servant Ruth. Spread the corner of your covering over me, for you are my family redeemer." The significance of this is this. The covering represents what Christ has done for us. Christ covers us completely. You remember last week we talked about the mercy seat covering our sin? This is another example of now Christ not only covering the sins of Israel, but He now is going to provide a covering for the Gentiles as well. So this is a significant part of the story. The next verse says, so Ruth stayed there, and she was there until morning, but she got up, and before it was light, for people to recognize each other. For Boaz had said, "No one must know that this woman was here at the threshing floor." Then Boaz said to her, "Bring your cloak and spread it out." And he measured 6 scoops of barley into the cloak, and he placed it on her back, and then he returned to town. So once again, he's watching out for her. Here is a virtuous woman that he is taking care of. He knows about her past. He knows the story of Moab. He knows what has happened in her history. These guys keep track of these things. But for Moab, but for Boaz, that doesn't change anything. This is a story of Christ redeeming us. We are Moab. We are the ones with this sultry past. Humanity just has incredible things that they can come up with and do. The story of Moab is just a drop in the bucket of what people do with each other and what people do to each other. But yet, in spite of all the things that we do to each other and all the things we do against each other, God has provided for us a redeemer. And He covers us completely. He doesn't cover us just a little bit. He covers us completely by the blood of His own Son and what He has done for us. And so now the story goes on in chapter 4, verse 1. So Boaz went to town gate and he took a seat there, and just as the family redeemer he had mentioned came by, so Boaz called out to him and he said, "Come over here and sit down, friend. I want to talk to you." So they sat down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders from the town and asked them to sit as witnesses. Who do you suppose the 10 leaders represent? The 10 Commandments. But Boaz calls the witnesses, 10 witnesses together to be a witness for what is going to happen. There is going to be a redemption that's going to take place, and there's going to be witnesses that are going to come together to watch this. So now let's go on. So this is the 10 Commandments. Verse 3. And Boaz said to the family redeemer, "You know Naomi who came from Moab. She is selling the land that belonged to her relative Elimelech. I thought I should speak to you about it so that you could redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want it, let me know right away, because I am next in line to redeem it after you." Oh, this is good stuff. This is good stuff. Pay attention to this now. The man replied, he said, "All right, I'll redeem it." Then Boaz said to him, "Oh yeah, by the way, of course your purchase of the land from Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth, the Moabite widow. That way she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family." Oh, that's going to change the dynamics of everything. So what happens? The guy says, "Well, I can't redeem it." The family redeemer replied, "Because this might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land, I cannot do it." Folks, the law cannot redeem you. It can condemn you. It can make you feel bad. It can make you see all the things about you that are wrong. Thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. And then when you shall do, you stand condemned. And now this law cannot do anything for you. The law cannot redeem you. This is who he's talking about. The 10 witnesses are the 10 Commandments. This close relative is the law. The close relative is the one who points out your faults, but it can't possibly redeem you. It can only condemn you. But Jesus has provided something for us and a way to give us redemption. So what happens? Then Boaz said to the elders and the crowd standing around, "You are witnesses today that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon." Remember those names: Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. We're going to come back to them in just a second. Look at Romans chapter 3, verse 21. "But now the righteousness of God without the law is manifested, being witnessed by the law and the prophets." The story of Boaz is the story of us. That all they could do was witness what Christ was going to do for us. They couldn't participate. The law can't redeem us, but the law stood as witnesses saying, Jesus is going to do what we could not do. Now let's go back to something very interesting. You are witnesses that today I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. And I've really wrestled with this because it messes with my theology in a big, big way. We told you what Elimelech means. Mahlon means sick. And Kilion means wasting away. Boaz has said, I am redeeming, I am buying back, I have bought this property. And if we bring the analogy out full to us today, God is saying to us, through Jesus Christ, I have bought your wasting away. I have bought your sickness. And that can mean a lot of things. And I'll let you guys decide for yourselves what that means to you. But spiritually, it means to us We were dead and we were dying and we were wasting away, but God has redeemed us through His Son, Jesus Christ. As we go to the end of the book of Ruth, we find something really cool. It says to us at the end of the book that Salmon was the father of Boaz, and Boaz was the father of Obed, and Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse was the father of David. So we have kind of a little lineage going on. We have Boaz and Obed and Jesse and then David. I don't think anything is put in the Bible by accident. And so as we get into Hebrew and begin to understand Hebrew, some things really kind of come out that maybe we had never seen before. So let's just get to the definitions of these guys' names and see if you don't see something cool. Boaz means by strength. By strength. Obed means servant. Jesse means wealth. And David means beloved. Now in the story of Ruth, we see Boaz giving generously to Ruth. Even though Ruth is a Moabitess, he just pours out generosity on her. He doesn't just make her glean like the law allows, just the corners of the field. He not only gives her the corner of the fields, he tells his own people to leave some out for her. And then she's allowed to kind of glean in the fields with all of her people through the end of the harvest. In fact, even into the time of wheat. They are in the time of barley, but now they also get to go into the time of wheat. So Ruth is not only blessed a little bit, she's blessed a whole bunch. And so not only is she provided for in great number, but also her mother-in-law is provided for in great number. And then Boaz marries Ruth. This is the story of us. But now let's go back to these names of these people. Let's put it all together. By strength. And by the way, Ruth means friendship. We are now brought as friendship into God. By strength, Christ became a servant so He could share His wealth with His beloved. Isn't that interesting, those names? The names, once again, Boaz, by strength, Obed, servant, Jesse, wealth, David, beloved. By the strength of God, Christ became a servant so that He could share the wealth of heaven with His beloved. Isn't that cool? Isn't that just like God? Isn't that just like the Jesus we've been talking about for 9 months? The Jesus that is so generous. The Jesus that is so giving. Folks, He doesn't look at you as just someone. You are His beloved, and He wants to pour out the wealth of heaven upon you. And I'm not talking about financial resources. I'm talking about look at what He has blessed you with. We came from folks who are full of sin and iniquity, and look what He has done. Look how He has redeemed us. Look around at the things that we have. Look around at the friendships that we have. Look at our families that we have. Look at the church that we are part of. Look at the wealth of heaven that He has poured out on everybody in this room because we are His beloved, and that's what He does for us. Amen? That is the God that we serve. I want to give all of my heart to this God. I want to give Him everything that we have. And I don't want to hold back anything. I want to give Him all because He's given it all to me. The story of Ruth is one of the story of Him being generous to us. And now we get to give our lives to Him and be generous back to Him in the best way that we can. By His stripes we are healed. By His generosity we are made wealthy. I want you to stand, and as the team comes forward, I'm going to pray for you as we celebrate what Christ has done for us. Mighty God, You have poured out Your love upon us. Through the story of Ruth, you see how You are Boaz in the story, and we are Ruth, and we don't deserve anything like these things like this. We were foreigners. We were outcasts. We have sordid past. We have shame by our own hand and all the things that we have done willingly. But You have redeemed us. You've brought us into Your family. We are now Your bride because of Your love for us, because of the way You extended Your hand towards us. Thank you, Father, for doing that for us through your Son, Jesus. Now may we just give our lives to you in response to what you've done for us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.